Today I'd like to talk to you about the raku firing process and how you're going to be making your lidded pots in ceramics 2. In ceramics 1, we made little vases or bottles. This time around we're going to step it up and we're going to be making lids that are well-fitting and designed to fit nicely with your pot. If you look at this first slide here, you will see some of the characteristics of raku that we often see. The lovely crackle, which occurs during the smoke aspect of the raku firing, and also the unglazed leaves here, the black leaves. Those occurred as black because when you leave something unglazed, it ends up by being black due to the smoke. You will remember that raku is a process that originally developed in Japan. They started doing it around the 16th century. It is characterized by low fire temperatures. Now, just because it's a low fire temperature does not mean it's a low fire clay. The raku clay body we use is actually heavily grogged raku stoneware, but we only fire it to the low firing temperatures. And it often has the unpredictable surface. Now these are tea bowls that were made by the famous potter Chojiro. I'm not too sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly or not, but they were used for the tea ceremony, and they are among the earliest raku pieces that we know of. This is a picture I got off the internet, but this guy who is raku firing here, he you can see has 3 layers. He's got 3 shelves with pots on them, and they are stacked on bricks. But this is a shuttle kiln. This thing pulls out from the kiln here. It's on a little cart. But he will now be taking the pots off. You can see that they're still glowing kind of a yellow-orange, indicating that they're still, over 1,000 degrees. Combustibles. You can see that the can here in the foreground already has the lid on, and it's created the smothering action, so that's where you get all the smoke. And any safe flammable material you can put in there, when I say safe, something that's not going to put off toxic fumes, but I often use wood chips and sawdust and maybe leaves, that sort of thing. But any of these will burn and create the removal of the pottery when it's hot will give you this great crackle that we see. It's the thermal shock that's creating the crackle on the glaze, because it goes from such a hot temperature to such a cold temperature so rapidly. The burning and the smoking of the combustibles will create these unpredictable surface patterns in your glaze. Now, just so you know, some of the crackles do not have this luster quality, and some of the lusters don't have the. You want to know that the colorful patterns are the result of reduction. Reduction is when we have an atmosphere where we reduce the amount of oxygen available for a fire to burn. So by putting the lid on the can while the fire is burning, you've reduced the amount of oxygen. And it actually borrows oxygen from the pots and their glaze, making this color surface variations. The big difference between raku firing and other firing methods is, of course, it's got to be done outside because of all the combustibles, but that thermal shock of going from 1500 degrees to room temperature is something that most clay bodies cannot withstand, and they would just crack or fall apart. It says explode here, but they would really just kind of crack and fall apart. They would lose their integrity. So raku clay it's that extra grog that opens up the clay body, and it just makes it more porous, a lot more durable for this. Now we're into some examples here. These are some lovely examples I found on the internet. It's a beautiful crackle up here and a really neat modeling effect that occurred down here. This is a rather random effect that I don't know how to control. Now, one thing about these handles is that is very skilled. Whoever did that was truly skilled. I would be very concerned. Don't design anything with extensions like this, or else the chances that it would break are very likely. Example of how they could use stains, probably a white glaze with some stains over it to create the very painterly effect, and I do have stains that we can Again, if you masked off areas or just avoided glazing areas, you would get these unglazed portions, which are pretty cool. And again, another example of don't do delicate things like that, or else it will. To think about a well-designed lid and a well-designed pot, you want them to fit nicely together. Typically, you would have a handle. This one doesn't because it's a small little pot, so it could be grasped. You can see that the little lines here are going to be little unglazed lines, probably just taped off, I would imagine, to prevent the glaze from. Discuss your requirements. You are going to have a lidded pot with a well-fitting lid, and you do have a handout about that. Maximum width is 6 inches. Do not go beyond 6 inches in width, because I try to fit about 6 of them in the kiln at one time, and if you keep it 6 inches or less, we should be okay. Now, you cannot use slab construction for the pot. You can make a slab lid, but do not make a pot that is slab, or it will fall apart. And then lastly, of course, you have to have your name and your bell ID'd on it someplace. Nice student examples. This was a slab lid that she did, and if you can imagine, on the inside of the lid was a ring that goes around in here that fits down into the pot. That flange holds it on the pot. This one was either slab or perhaps it was pinch that was cleaned. I don't know which one, but again, this one also has a flange right on the inside to hold it in. Example of a crackle. And again, this lid has a little flange sticking down in there. Lids with flanges are often the easiest, but you can choose whatever design works best. This one was kind of neat. It was almost an exact fit. They wanted it to be fairly flush there, and it also has a flange. And this one was probably could have been sized a little bit better. You can see the gapping there, but that also had a flange. This little snowman pot of Luke Biggers, the entire hat was flanged and hollow, and that was the lid, of course. And then this was a great little lid with a very sculptural flower on the top. These are some wheel-thrown stoner pieces. They're not raku. I wanted to show you some other nice examples of lids. Say on this jar, the jar actually has a flange that sticks up on the jar, and then the lid fits over that flange. And on these lovely little ones, these had little flanges that stick down into the again, sorry, this one is so blurry, but that has a flange. And this one, I know this is probably a slab here, so you don't want to think slab. But this is neat because it has a recessed area on the pot itself, so the lid fits in there. So this has what is called a gallery. And this pot right here, if you can see that edge, this has a gallery because it is on the pot and it holds the lid in place. This was kind of neat how it had a little keystone there. Now, if this were one of my students, I would recommend a more sturdy handle. That looks rather precarious. If you want to add things on, you can after it's been fired. Again, I know that both of these are wheel thrown. If you looked at this blue pot here, this does have a little gallery down in there because the lid fits down inside the last slide here. But this will hopefully give you some nice ideas. Again, added pieces on. This great little pot over here on the right, this definitely has a gallery. It's fitting down into the gallery. And that's just a lovely little piece. So I hope that these give you some ideas, and I hope that you all come up with some